Coming up next, This Week in Computer Hardware, Macintosh or Hackintosh, AMD's new 64-bit CPUs, Intel's new SSDs, and touchscreens for Windows 8. All that and more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 193, recorded November 1st, 2012. 48-core CPUs. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Patrick Norton, and this is the show on the TWiT network where we aim to bring you the most important and useful news in tech hardware. We get into the PC parts, we get into the tablets, and once in a while, we'll even mention a phone. We love to answer your questions. Do us a favor, send them out to us at Twitch, TWICH, at twit.tv. And right now, hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, joining me will be my steadfast hardware buddy, Mr. Ryan Shrout. Mr. Shrout, did you feel the winds of Superstorm Sandy?
I felt no such thing, except apparently the internet connection did here. The audio seems to be going through fine. You know what we need? The hardware I've got figured out. What we need is a Skype podcast, one that helps us figure out if it's not me, it's you. One of us always seems to be having these types of issues, so...
Welcome to This Week in Skype. I'm Patrick Norton, and this is the program where we try to bring you the news that will actually make Skype the way you thought it should behave or would behave if you actually paid money for it. Joining me, as always, my steadfast buddy in Skype suffering, Mr. Ryan Shrout. Ryan? Actually,
This is awful.
Oh, my goodness. You froze.
Yeah, I know. Go figure. It happened like 3 times during that intro too.
Well, let's you know what? We should probably let's move on to the first story. Before we move on to the first story, I want to give a shout out to my folks who we recently discovered still have a house. They'll get to see what's left of the interior in a couple days, hopefully. If you're on the East Coast and you've been stomped on by Superstorm, formerly Hurricane Sandy, our thoughts are with you. Before you try to plug any of the hardware that got soaked in, should you have been so unlucky as to have soaked hardware, let it dry out. This is a good time to try to find some kind of desiccant and throw those smaller items in there. Pull the hard drives out of your computers, dry those out separately in case you want to try to do data recovery. And as always, back your stuff up. All right. Hardware loss is painful, and it can be emotionally and financially devastating, but data loss can be personally and professionally crippling. So back up, ladies and gentlemen, and if you think it can't happen to you, trust me, it will. Start backing up now. Carbonite, Crash Plan, Dropbox, whatever you want to use, get something backing up your stuff so it's stored somewhere other than in your house in case it burns down. Ask me how I know.
Does the rice, just like putting your hard drive in a bag of rice trick work? Like with
it
phones?
Does work. It's not. I prefer to actually have a full-on like desiccant pack. You know, basically what you're looking for. You know, it's kind of funny. One of my personal favorite ones are if you search for desiccant or silica desiccant, basically what you're looking for is silica gel inside a small aluminum container or steel container. You can find these on Amazon. You can find them in gun shops. You can find them occasionally in stores. But the idea is, yes, rice will work. There are things that work better. The silica gel ones are particularly useful because they actually are rechargeable. Basically, like the beads start out blue. As they become saturated with water, they turn pink. You can put them in the oven for 3 hours at like 325. They dry out again, so you can recharge it over and over again. But Amazon.com, search for silica gel desiccants. Something that's actually worth having in your house before you drop your phone in the toilet or something like that. and you throw a bunch of those in a Ziploc bag, zip it shut. You know, and it's brutal. I've done flood recovery. I've had a flooded basement in my past. My folks live on Long Beach Island, which was stomped on by Superstorm Sandy. They probably lost all their electronics on the first floor. You know, they didn't lose the house, so that's a good thing. We're also assuming that the big pile of boats from the marina behind their house didn't get shoved through the back of the house, but that's a whole other conversation. But seriously, you know, if you're worried about, you know, basically, unless you live in this small circle of land that's kind of part of Wyoming and part of Utah, you're at some point you are going to get hit by some kind of natural disaster, whether it's a tornado or a storm or a flood. I could go on and on and on. And even if none of those things happen, you could still manage to burn your house down one day, or somebody else could burn it down for you. And in which case, if you don't have your data backed up off-site, that's the problem. Case in point, we're going to talk about the fabulous Yoga 13, the new sort of flippable computer from Lenovo. Ryan's going to tell you more about that because he's had it for a few hours longer than I have. But as painful as it would be to lose this, the really important stuff, and they're going to break me on a wheel for saying this at Lenovo, is not the hardware, it's the information and the stuff you've stored and created inside of that. So back up your stuff online today. And I'm going to stop, lest I get all emotional and fraught and talk about this for another 10 minutes. Intel SSD 335. This is exciting. Intel's first 20-nanometer SSD. Alan Malventano wrote it up for PCPer.com. I'm going to lean to my left and sneeze, and Ryan's going to tell you just a little bit more.
So, so this is a new iteration from Intel. It is the first 20-nanometer part. What the good news for that is that it will probably mean lower prices. What's interesting with Intel drives is they tend to be the ones that don't drop prices right away. They don't do price cuts. They'll slowly kind of come down in price, but nothing really dramatic. Performance-wise, it's the 240 gig model that Alan reviewed is rated at 500 megabytes read, 450 megabytes per second write, which is incredibly reasonable, right, for SATA 3. It's not the fastest, but it's pretty high up there. It is a SandForce-based SSD. It uses the 2281 controller, and obviously is using Intel 20-nanometer flash on this. So if we look at, just a couple of the performance metrics, it performs kind of as you would expect, about as fast as, say, the Intel 520 series SSD, which was their other SandForce-based drive. The whole point here is 20-nanometer flash, lowering the cost to entry for these SSDs, though. If you look at the conclusion page, the kind of estimates on price are 76 cents per gigabyte. So that's not tremendously that's not a tremendously low price today, but for an Intel MSRP, that's the lowest by far we've ever seen it, right? So expect to pay less than $180 for this 240 gig drive, which is great. Has a 3-year warranty, very, very good performance. There's only one question about the SSD, and it has a little bit to do with the life expectancy of the flash. It's the first 20-nanometer flash we've seen. It is MLC, so we're still a little hesitant on what that means in terms of the overall life. One of the things that's causing some issues is the kind of the software that rates how much lifespan is left on the drive is kind of leaning very much so, erring on the side of caution. So the only kind of potential concern for the drive is lifespan. It's the software is erring on the side of caution. It seems like Intel is maybe only rating this flash memory at 1,000. I think it was 1,000 write cycles, which doesn't seem like a lot, but you got to think if you're writing 240 gigs 1,000 times through, you're writing 240 terabytes worth of data. Not reading 240 terabytes, writing 240 terabytes. And I don't think that's something that many of our listeners or viewers will have to worry about, really.
Right. I mean, somebody who's doing like really serious video production on like a daily basis and is constantly turning over. I mean, I could think of some scenarios where people might do that, but most folks write a lot less data than you might think. As silly as that may sound, you know what? I'm curious. I want to see the price drop from 76 cents a gigabyte, which probably will happen in the none too distant future. And that's it sounds like a really good deal for an Intel SSD.
They tend to. I would say that people of all the SandForce drives, that would maybe be the company I have the most
faith.
Yeah, exactly. Now, anything can happen to any drive from any manufacturer, of course, but I'm all about seeing these prices come down. Hopefully, we'll see these push every other vendor down as well.
That would be nice. The Lenovo Ideapad Yoga 13 Windows 8 Ultrabooks. Ryan and I, oddly enough, are twinsies. And of course, I think we showed you probably both from CES. The idea here, of course, is that if I can just get it in the picture,
there you go.
It flips all the way over, and it's not just a notebook, kids. It's a tablet too. Core i5 powered Ivy Bridge Core i5 Ultrabook. And I got to say, I was really surprised when I first got my grubby little paws on this in a meeting with Lenovo, and now that I have it in my hands, like a shipping level piece of hardware, is how robust that joint feels. Because I think for a lot of these fancier Ultrabooks we're seeing, these fancier laptops we're seeing, if it's going to do strange things involving hinges and swivels, you want them to feel like they're going to last forever, and this one does feel really, really good.
I agree. I was a little bit worried about that because if you're flipping back and forth between tablet mode, and obviously we should point out that they advertise that it can do other modes as well, right? So you can do what they call stand mode, which basically puts the keyboard on the table or on a surface, and then you can use it as a tablet that way. My favorite mode is what they call tent mode, which maybe sounds a little weird, but you basically set it like this on a counter or a table surface, and not only can you then use it as a tablet that direction, but there's no screen kind of bounce to it, which I like a lot, whereas you kind of have some of that when you're using it like this. You can kind of see that there's a screen bounce to it. It's not very dramatic, right. But there is some there. So, but I agree. I was much more impressed with my initial couple of days with this than I expected to be.
What are you seeing for battery life since you've had it for a couple of days?
Pretty much on par with other Ultrabooks, 4.5 to 5 hours. Nothing spectacular, but kind of in line with like the Lenovo X1 Carbon that I use. It's a very similar form factor. And it's not great, but it's pretty good, right? So we're actually in the middle of rewriting a battery test, like kind of as a real world battery test as we can get using JavaScript and some IT management tools to do that kind of stuff, because I think a lot of the mobile mark and the Peacemaker battery stuff is kind of artificial. And people who do battery testing that turn Wi-Fi off completely, in my mind, missed the boat on what people want to know about these devices. So,
yeah, it's still one of my favorite conversations. And so, how did you get 8 hours of battery life out of it? Well, we turned Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off, and we played a video on the DVD. No, we had it actually it cached in main system memory. And I just remember being like, and let me guess, screen 50%? Well, it was more like 25%, which we consider usable in a reasonable office environment. And I was just like, you guys suck.
Yeah, you know what else is interesting? We both have the 13, which is kind of like, I think you said it before the show, is your ideal size for a work machine. And I would agree with that. They're also going to have a Yoga 15 and a Yoga 11, but the Yoga 11 is actually going to be based on an NVIDIA Tegra chip. So it's going to be Windows RT based. So I am curious to give that one a try too.
And I say that with love and affection, but no, I don't need RT in my life. My life is complicated enough between OS 10, Windows 8, and Linux. And Windows 7. Yeah.
Yes, one of my kind of concerns was that they were focusing too much on making sure that the hinge bent all the way around. But even when you use it just as a laptop, it works just like a normal laptop. Like I was afraid it would somehow feel differently. The screen would act differently. It would react differently. But if you're just using the touchpad and you're using the keyboard and you just use it as a normal device, it actually still works really well. And I know we've talked about it here a lot for desktop users going back and forth. The idea of Windows 8 being a touch interface and all that other kind of crap. I found myself very easily getting into the idea of using my keyboard and touchpad, but in certain instances, reaching up and touching the screen to do something. And it didn't feel, I guess, as jarring as it can on a desktop, right? Where you're not using a touchscreen interface. You're traditionally using much larger screens, right? 22, 25, 27, 30-inch monitors. If you're using multiple of them, it's even more kind of a jarring experience. But even as just a laptop, it performs very well. It's an Ultrabook, so you have a little bit of an idea of what the form factor is going to be like, what the weight's going to be like, what the performance is going to be like. I have you can't show it on the video here, but in the video on PCPro.com, we have the X1 Carbon sitting next to the Yoga, and they're very, very similar products, right? Like the form factor of them is pretty much exactly the same, but the bezel on the ThinkPad is much smaller around the screen, whereas it's a little bit bigger around on the Yoga, which, that was why we get a 13.3 inch monitor as well. Did you like the screen on it as well, the 16:9 resolution display?
Yeah, it's actually 13 inches is kind of my preferred size for notebooks at this point. I haven't done any. It's been here for about 4 hours, so I haven't done any really hardcore side-by-side comparison. But it's sitting here right now, looking at my MacBook Air. I think it's very, very comparable. But I also haven't really. I'm sitting here like staring at my MacBook, which really makes great television and radio. But so far, it feels really good. It would be nice to calibrate both of them and then take a look at them again to see whether or not it feels right. But for general business use and personal use, I think it's more than enough monitor. It is.
I have my X1 Carbon and this Yoga sitting next to each other, and the ThinkPad is very much a blue display, and the Yoga is a much warmer display. The only thing that I think I would have liked to have seen. It only has 2 USB ports, one USB 3 and one standard USB. I would have liked for at the very least both. Yeah, why not both USB 3? I don't understand that. I really don't get that. And it seems like there's enough space on the side for more USB ports. It's not like an Ultrabook with like a teardrop shape where it kind of comes down to a point or anything like that. So, you should be able to fit more USB ports on here, which would be nice, because 2 of them, if you've got like an external mouse connected and a webcam, okay, that's it. Now you're done. You've got no other option. You've got to hook up that compact flash memory card reader. You don't get to do that. I do like the full size HDMI port though, as opposed to
get a USB hub, Mr. Shrout.
Yeah, but who wants to carry all that extra stuff?
Plus, finding a USB 3.0 hub is a real pain in the patootie. It's kind of funny. It's been interesting. The resolution on the Ideapad is, I should say the Yoga, is 1600 by 900, which is more than enough resolution for me on a 13-inch screen. Although it's been interesting. It's interesting to watch like the reviews. The first reviews of the iPad Mini are coming out, and what's been interesting is there seems to be a real dividing line. People who already own the Retina iPad versus people who don't, in the sense that if you're coming from an iPad or an iPad 2, the iPad Mini looks great, and if you're coming from the iPad 3 with the Retina display, all of a sudden you don't have. I think Daring Fireball basically said it was gritty and grating and painful, and I'm not even I'm not quoting him nearly correctly, but as a iPad Retina user, it was painful to go to the relatively low resolution of the iPad Mini. Outside of the small group of people that have Retina displays on notebooks, I don't think anybody's going to have a problem with a 16 by 900 display. No. It's certainly a step up from the 1440 by 900. That's my MacBook Air resolution at this point. So it's exciting. Overall, I think I like the machine. We did a little video preview of it, but we're going to have a full the full write-up and review on it in a little bit. It feels like a nice system. Surprisingly, when I saw it at CES, I thought it was kind of a gimmick, but I might have been converted so far. It's all about the reading. If you are running Windows 8, Robert Herron actually was talking about this on TechZilla yesterday. He has updated his primary home theater PC, which is a big deal because Robert's running a cable card tuner and some pretty fancy stuff in his home theater PC. Running Windows 8, you can get a free Windows Media Center key through January 31st of 2013, which is I don't know if it's a huge deal, but it's $10. So to get the Windows Media Center functionality into Windows 8, you're going to have to add Windows Media Center after you install Windows 8, and then it's going to require money after the so get your install right. We talked in the last couple of weeks about how to upgrade, how to get the best discounts on upgrading to Windows 8. Now let's talk about getting Windows Media Center set up there. So it's frustrating. that when, basically Microsoft decided they didn't want to pay for all the codecs for Windows Media Center for all the installations, so they decided to let the Windows Media Center community kind of fend for itself. If you want to get your green button on, if you've never seen those web pages, they're pretty awesome. But January 31st, 2013, you will have to have the Pro version of Windows 8, which may cost you $40 if you haven't purchased the Pro version. I highly recommend buying the Pro version just for that. Of course, I'm a Windows Media Center fiend, but it is good stuff. And get yourself a free key. And if you think about it, get two.
Yeah, I think one of our guys last night was saying that in the fine print, it's a limit to 5 per person, but 1 per email address. So you're allowed to get up to 5. So if you want to, if you usually have a couple of systems running, go ahead and do it. Even if you don't have Windows 8 yet, maybe you will by the end of the year, by January 31st. And you may want that as part of that promo. I was talking to people last night. I said, it kind of feels like Microsoft is trying pretty hard to give you Media Center Edition for free without blanketing it across the entire operating system, right? Like I've seen this is the second such promotion where they're kind of giving that feature away if you want it, as opposed to blanket installs.
I almost feel like this is some kind of litmus test. Like if they get enough people requesting enough licenses for Windows Media Center, they may sort of fire up development on it in a big way.
Yep.
But Robert Heron actually on HC Nation, roosterteeth.com/HC Nation, starts talking about it. And the one flaw he actually found with it, which I'm going to make you go watch because I'm mean that way.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of interesting. AMD, of course, we've had a lot of somewhat less than thrilling, exciting, positive news around AMD. But I thought this was interesting that they're going to be AMD is going to be building 64-bit ARM processors for the server market. And you opened up this article, Mr. Shrout, on PCPer.com, quote, on a not very technically reliable webcast today, AMD has
it's like announced. Pot calling kettle black right now, isn't it?
I wasn't even thinking of the irony in that statement. You said that and I'm like, what? Were they just saying like, we're going to do this. We don't know what process or what scale or how many transistors it's going to have. What do you think? What's going on with this? Is this an actual partnership between ARM and AMD, or what's really going on?
It is. It's maybe even it's more than like a partnership, right? So they in their first kind of announcement together, they talked about AMD was using Cortex A5, basically cores architecture in one of their Opterons to enable, or one of their APUs to enable some security features. Well, now what they announced this week was that they're actually going to build. Oh, my video's kind of cramped. Let's see if it fixes itself here in a minute. They're going to build processors with only ARM architecture on them. So not x86. They're going to license 64-bit core processors or 64-bit ARM processors. And if you scroll down and you look down at what the secret sauce is on the story, you'll see that the part of the story that they're bringing in here is called Freedom Fabric, which is not, in my opinion, the best name ever. It kind of sounds like Freedom Fries or something like that. But
sorry, that one still makes me laugh.
The idea is pretty complex, but basically think of it as routers for processors. They're basically going with the fact that if you take a bunch of ARM processors and put them in the server world, you're basically moving. You have a much more efficient computing process, but now you have a much less efficient network behind it. And the C Micro stuff was apparently going to fix that.
Interesting. Are you buying into it? You sound kind of hesitant. Is that the right word for this? Despondent, disappointed?
Yeah, hesitant is a good word. I would say it's not something that's supposed to be coming out till 2014 anyway. It sounds more like AMD kind of hedging their bets. They've been falling behind a lot to Intel in the x86 world. So it seems very likely that they're like, okay, we have some experience, we have some expertise in the server market and the enterprise market. None of the current ARM processor players do have that same expertise. Let's maybe get a leg up on that and see if we can't fix it and figure that out. In
case this Tegra thing doesn't work out.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, that's for NVIDIA's working on their own kind of supercomputer based ARM stuff, but it's going to be much more difficult than I think people realize. But I do think there's usefulness there. If you have, at AMD's announcement, they had Facebook, one of the head IT guys for Facebook on stage, and there's no better. There's probably very few larger computing users in the world than what Facebook is, right? And so they're saying that they're not every workload, but a lot of workloads will be able to take advantage of this more power efficient server architecture, more processors, more power efficient processors.
That's a big deal.
So,
I mean,
it is.
Only people who would be like bigger than Facebook would be maybe Google or IBM. Right. I mean, you would have to go to something. That's interesting, actually. That's a happy thought. So The Verge actually had an article by Sean Hollister. ARM's 2014 processors will blow away today's smartphone chips with 3 times the performance or 1/4 the battery drain. Now, are we still talking about the 64-bit processors here? The Cortex A15s? The Cortex A15s are coming out in the Chromebook and the Nexus 10 tablet, but we're talking about like the A53, the 57.
Yeah, so these are the first 64-bit parts ARM architecture. So that's the big deal. These are actually the cores that AMD will be using in their Opteron branded ARM processors, the A57 and the A53. What's interesting is that second paragraph gives you an idea of the two dichotomies you can get. You can either, one, get 3 times the performance in the same power budget, or you can get the same performance of today in 1/4 of the power. Now, that presents a wide range of options there for users, for OEMs rather, right? So now you can kind of cut that in the middle, get a little bit more power for a little bit more performance for a little bit less power. And I'm more interested in how this will translate into actual cell phones and tablets and getting that 24-hour battery life type goal that everybody seems to want to have.
So this kind of makes me wonder, our next story up here is Intel actually wanting to see 48-core processors in future smartphones. Tim Berry wrote this up. It's researchers at Intel's Barcelona, Spain labs, quote, working on multi-core solutions, bringing massive numbers of processing cores to smartphones and tablets. And we should put this out. We should point this out. This is like 5 to 10 years out. Today we're looking at quad-core system on a chip. What would you use 48 cores of processing power, or is Intel obviously looking far into the future? Intel's event horizon is a little farther out than mine. What are they actually thinking that cell phones are going to be doing that's going to take advantage of massively threaded applications, or are the operating systems going to become massively threaded to give you the performance you want across multiple applications simultaneously?
I think it's both of those things. I think a lot of it is your cell phones are going to be, think of what Google goggles, or not Google goggles, but what's the Google Glass is supposed to want to do, right? And imagine all of the different things that it's going to try to do at the same time, and then you get an idea of how much processing power that's going to need. And 48 cores seems crazy now because we don't have 48 cores even in some of our super high-end servers. We're talking about 48 cores in your pocket. Obviously, it's a very different type of core when we're talking about that. But, they're only talking about 5 to 10 years out, not that far away before you see some of this kind of stuff. And this kind of goes in the vein that Intel has been walking down with the mini core architecture, the MIC, I guess is what they're calling it, right? Mini integrated core. On the server side things as well. So
interesting. Yeah. Analyst Patrick Moorhead argues that 5 to 10 years is effectively an eternity in technology time. And by the time the hardware with massive numbers of cores is feasible, the software will be there. Interesting thought. So we should probably take a moment to remind everybody, Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address if you want to ask us a question. We're going to get into some of our audience's questions in a moment. This is somehow, for some strange and wondrous reason, your first episode of Twitch, perhaps some of your friends shared Twitch with you, gave you a link. You can find all of our episodes at twit.tv. twitch.tv/twitch. And you can load them in your favorite podcatcher, iTunes, whatever else it is. The initial reviews for the iPad Mini are coming out. We'll be talking about those for the next week or two. And let's take a moment to thank our sponsor this week, Bespoke Post. Now, this is normally we're all about the tech sponsors on Twitch, but this is really cool. Bespoke Post it's a product subscription service for men. They have you subscribe. They have a team of experts that scour the world to discover the best and most unique products around. And every month they send you an, and I quote, box of awesome. And they basically fill it with kind of the experiences and the items that they've found. And the first one, Ryan and I are actually waiting for the first one to show up. I won't tell you anything about it. I don't think I'm allowed to yet. But we both saw the list of what's in the box, and we were both like, we want. Normally it's $45 per box, the free shipping. If you don't like it, you can return it. They give you a heads up on what's in the box, so you can opt out of getting the box if you don't want it. But if you sign up now at bespokepost.com/twit, you can receive 20% off your first month subscription of $45, and that is bespokepost.com/twit. Interesting idea. The idea is that they go out and find amazing things and bring them into your life, deliver them right there through the mail to your doorstep. I like it. Certainly what we were showing off, it would be one of the first boxes. It's pretty interesting. And do us a favor, check it out, bespokepost.com/twit. You'll get a 20% off your first month subscription. And it's interesting, you can also get like 3 months for $135, a half year for $270. So, this might be something, if you are shopping for someone who has everything because they already went out and bought all the cool gadgets, the minute they hit the store or the minute that Amazon brought them to their doorstep, you might want to take a look at bespokepost.com. And if you go to bespokepost.com/twit, you'll be benefiting the entire Twit network and your beloved Twitch. And we want to thank bespokepost.com for sponsoring us this week. Email questions. Ryan, are you ready for an email question?
No.
Well, I'm going to read the question while you call Ryan back. We got an email from Scott about replacing a Mac computer. He says, I've been an exclusive Mac user for over 15 years, but I love technology, and I've listened to your show for years. Thank you. It's come time to replace my anemic 2006 MacBook Pro, and when I began to price new Macs, I was disheartened. To save money, I was going to go with the Mac Mini and then replace the hard drive with an SSD, upgrade to 16 gigs of RAM, add Thunderbolt, buy an external hard drive. The price came up to $2,700 if I include a Thunderbolt display. What a bargain! Heavy sarcasm. I've never built a PC before, but I am mechanically inclined, and I think I can do this without too many problems. I don't know if this is healthy confidence or naivete, says Scott. I primarily use my home computer for photography. I have a 3 terabyte Lightroom library and a process Canon 5D Mark II RAW files. My biggest needs are a snappy processor that can handle Lightroom and Photoshop, as well as an excellent monitor that can display those images. 27-inch 2560 by 1440 IPS display, please. Video processing is not a big concern, but I would like to be able to edit 1080p video from time to time. I do not game. Since I would have to repurchase Lightroom and Photoshop, I would like to come in under $2,000. Keep in mind, I am building from the ground up, so I have to purchase the OS as well as a case. I have loads of a hard disk drive, so I just need a 256 gigabyte SSD. Would you recommend that I go this route, or should I stay in the shallow end of the pool and get the Mac Mini? Also, Windows 7 or Windows 8. Adobe just said that CS6 and Lightroom play nice with Windows 8, so I guess it's personal preference. And I got to say, I'm going to throw in something you didn't suggest here, Scott, and it's certainly something that's been going on around the TWiT offices, and it's something that we've been doing here at Revision 3, which is building Hackintoshes. I'd also like to say, first of all, I love my MacBook Air. I pretty much do 80% of my computing on that, and the other 80% of my computing I do on a Core i5 desktop at work, and the other 80% I do on a Core i7 system at home. But a MacBook Air, a brand new MacBook Air would kick the snot out of your 2006 MacBook Pro, have excellent battery life. But if you really want like an SSD and 16 gigabytes of RAM, I would really think about going with building a Hackintosh system, and you can get the building your first PC, which I think anybody can do if they're patient and take their time. But you can do that and still run your existing operating system and not have to pay for Aperture and Photoshop again, which is pretty awesome. If you are thinking about building a Hackintosh, there's a website. Oops. So a little bit when you go to open
actually,
up a window. They were
recorded an episode of Know How on the TWiT network today about building a Hackintosh.
Cool.
Leo and Ayaz went through kind of the process. They were actually using Chad's machine that we helped him pick the components for a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So definitely go check out Know How at what is it? twit.tv/KW or KH, I guess. I think it's what it is. But they have a new episode coming out this week, probably about the same time this episode comes out, about the process of building it. And you can see if it's easy enough or a little bit maybe too complex for you.
Yeah, it's building a PC is much easier than it used to be. And of course, I can't find the one page I want with the hardware builds, the hardware guides. Why is it you can never find the one website you want?
Or the one page on it, yeah. But
exactly.
Hackintosh, I think, is a good idea. But there's nothing wrong with building the Windows-based system either, I guess, right?
Right. No, my only thought was, like, if you're used to OS 10, if you already have the licenses for the software you want. And Scott, a really good place to go to learn more about building a Hackintosh is Tony, Tony, MacX86.com. It's kind of the gold standard for websites to help you kind of walk through the process of taking common, ordinary, inexpensive Windows hardware and building a machine that'll kick the snot out of some of the ridiculously overpriced desktop options from Apple. You won't have the same pretty Apple case, but you'll get all of the performance for a heck of a lot less money.
Yes.
Earl's got a question about touchscreen desktops. He says, as a woodworker, Earl is looking at building a new desk with my desktop system built in. Along with this, I would like to move to Windows 8 and put a 27-inch monitor with a touchscreen on a mobile arm so I can move it forward when doing some tasks that are touch-intensive and back when I'm gaming. I have 3 questions. First, is it easy to set up a monitor to take advantage of touchscreen applications? Do I need to do anything special, or do they just work? Second, I run a 2-screen setup. Will it cause issues if one screen is touch and the other is not? Third, I'm currently running an Asus P8 Z77V Pro Core i5, GeForce GTX 670 gigabytes of RAM, or GTX 670 and 8 gigabytes of RAM. Will I need to upgrade some components, or am I okay with what I have? And I would say no. Basically, the Lloyd Case was actually just on demonstrating one of the new 27-inch monitors. Unfortunately, 1080p. It's not one of the high-res ones. But there's an HDMI cable or DVI or there's like a DVI cable and a USB cable that plug into your computer. It's as easy as plugging in a mouse, effectively. Windows 8 is going to recognize it. Windows 8 is not going to have a problem if your second monitor doesn't have touch. You're just going to have to go from, reaching up here to using your mouse or your touchpad. And I think you have more than enough hardware to happily run a pair of 1080p monitors. That's a Core i5 3570K, 8 gigs of RAM, and a GTX 670 is more than enough tool for this particular job, I would say. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I think that's nice little pictorial there.
He's wearing his burqa.
Yeah, this is obviously some bits error going on here. But that's more than enough hardware, and other than I think his own capability of switching back between touchscreen and non-touchscreen monitors, I think he should be okay.
There you have it. Let's do one last question before we mercifully free Ryan, who apparently is suffering. Everybody who is still using the internet on the East Coast is apparently on the same backbone that Ryan's on. And we got an email from David on the eternal wait. He says, I have a Core i7-920 CPU with an A58A UD3R. I like the game. My computer, as it stands, does Skyrim well under medium settings. I was wondering if soon would be a good time to update, or should I wait for like the next gen Intel next year? If soon, what should I look for? And Kevin actually had a very similar question. He says, I have a question about upgrading. Should I jump on the Ivy Bridge train now or wait for Haswell? Will Haswell have a significant performance advantage over the current line of Ivy Bridge Core i7 processors, or is it more optimized to save power for battery-operated devices? He's got a Linfield i5-750 overclocked at 3.6 gigahertz, a GTX 460, 16 gigs of RAM, and his OS is running on an SSD. Quote, I often have my CPU at 100% for extended periods of time rendering video and 3D animations. I can upgrade my current system for a reasonable price, but I don't want to be impatient and upgrade too soon if Haswell is worth the wait. I know that your answer will be based partly on speculation at this point in time. Thank you, Kevin, for knowing that in advance. Since the processor has not been released yet, but I trust your judgment. What are you going to do, Patrick? Man, I'm going to wait.
That was my ad lib, by the way.
You know, I always wait. I wait for as long as possible for upgrading. I've got a Core i7-920 and a Core i5. I want to say a 3570. You know, the biggest limitation on the Core i5 system is the amount of RAM I have in it. I set it up as sort of a video ripping and serving box, so there's only 4 gigabytes of RAM. And first off, I got to say that Windows 8 handles memory a lot better than Windows 7. So simply going from Windows 7 to Windows 8 made it a little less irritating, and it also feels snappier because some of the interface processing, the UI processing, is taken off the main CPU and put on the GPU section of the processor. Or I should say basically the graphics. It offloads some of the UI calculations, you know, to the GPU from the CPU as it was in previous versions of Windows. Man, I don't laugh at me. Point and laugh at me if I'm wrong, Ryan.
Okay.
I don't really see anything that makes me think Haswell is going to be like a 50% jump in performance or even a 20% jump in performance. Or am I just underestimating the glory that is Haswell?
No, I don't think that'll be anything that dramatic. And if he's doing a lot of stuff where his system's sitting at 100% already, then he's going to see a huge jump in performance moving to Ivy Bridge now, and he'll get that performance now. Haswell's going to be 6 months or something like that before its desktop variants are out. So I am never on the I'm almost never on the side of waiting for hardware.
Yeah, I mean, the worst case scenario is that it does magically turn out to be 30% faster than an Ivy Bridge Core i7. But I'm not betting any money on that. I would, if you're, for David, for David who's playing Skyrim well under medium settings, I suspect he might want to upgrade his GPU and wait on the CPU for a little bit longer. And for Kevin, man, if you're constantly hammering against the limitations of your machines, at the very least, I would just, move from the Core i5 to a Core i7. I mean, or do you think it's even worth,
No, I would leave. If you're going to upgrade the processor at all, leave that generation of architecture. Linfield's, the move from Linfield to Sandy Bridge was pretty significant, and the move then to Ivy Bridge would be even more significant. So, he's still got 16 gigs of RAM. You may be able to reuse that as well. And you can reuse that GTX 460 for a little bit as well. When somebody says their CPU is running at 100% for extended periods of time, rendering video and stuff, I say, okay, this is somebody who will actually take advantage of that additional CPU horsepower. They're not just saying they're just going to build a gaming machine for it, which makes me much more comfortable in saying, you know what, go ahead and get a 3570K. Or in his case, if he's doing rendering, the 3770K, with the hyperthreading enabled will be a noticeable bump up.
I was going to say, isn't Linfield running DDR2 and not DDR3?
I don't know. It's been a long time, man. Don't ask me tough questions like that.
Sorry.
No, it's DDR3.
4 years ago. 3 years ago?
It is DDR3. It came out in 2009. But DDR3 was very expensive then. So, he could reuse that memory because that's a lot of it. To be honest with you, I just ordered 16 gigs of memory for a new system I was building for myself, and it was $74. So I almost felt guilty about it, right? I felt like, oh, man, I need to give these guys a little bit more to subsidize so that, they can build me 32 gig kits later.
Here's an extra $20. I should eat something better than ramen tonight. Yeah, I got to say that the price of memory is ridiculously low. I'm actually, it's the simple act of not wanting to choose one of the 300 memory kits, like 16 or 32 gigabyte memory kits that are so cheap. Is the only reason I haven't upgraded that Core i5 box yet, because I keep looking at memory and being like, wow, oh, wait, here's one with shiny gold heat sinks on it, because, the reality is the actual memory settings are not
the only hiccup I've had in the whole process is I actually ordered memory last week, but Newegg has a big shipping facility in New Jersey. I forget what city is it in, but it somehow amazingly has not left the warehouse yet. So I called them and they said, you should just place another order and we'll ship it from a different warehouse. I was like, okay.
Oops.
Yeah, oops.
On that bright and cheerful note, we do want to give another shout out to everybody on the East Coast. When you do eventually get to listen to the podcast, our thoughts are with you, and we hope your house and your personal property and your tech didn't get trashed. For everybody who wasn't going through a violent storm earlier this week, or Superstorm Sandy, cue giant ridiculous graphics in the background, we want to remind you to back up, and back up today. Make sure you have fresh battery. Like, a friend of mine was so funny. He was like, I have 26 AA batteries in my house. None of them are charged. That was one of the funniest tweets. There was a lot of not funny tweets and Facebook messages coming out while Sandy was stomping all over the East. But that one made me laugh. Fortunately, he had like several hundred plumber's candles, so he wasn't sitting in the dark in his apartment in Jersey City. But it was a really intense week for a lot of people, and that should be a good reminder to everybody to, like, check your flashlights, make sure there's batteries in your emergency radio. If you don't have one of Eton's radios, go ahead and get one. They sell them at Radio Shack. If you don't want to buy it off of Amazon, they've got a crank. They can charge your phone, keep your phones charged, use text messages, know solid sources of good emergency information. There was an asshat, to use one of my favorite terms, who was basically making up scary information and posting it on Twitter and getting a bunch of traction around it. He's since been publicly outed. And will probably be,
it probably happened a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Not like this guy in question actually was somebody who shouldn't have been doing it and was doing a very good job of scaring people because he was getting some viral traction on Twitter.
Gotcha.
I look forward to next time he rolls into a diner and somebody recognizes him. That'll be, you hear a story about, somebody getting like egged into submission. It'll probably be this guy. So you know what? Be nice to everybody. Back your stuff up. Make sure you have batteries for your flashlight and fresh water. Ready.gov is a good place to go if you're or 72hours.org are all pretty good places to go if you want to learn more about putting together, basically preparing yourself and your family for a major emergency. Better to do that now. The tornado takes out half your neighborhood.
Yep.
So, Ryan, I am glad the trees in your yard didn't get shoved through your house and that you're not underwater right now.
Yeah, nothing too dramatic here. We did have, like the 2 feet of snow that fell in West Virginia. There was a possibility of that coming enough inland to hit us, but no such bad luck.
That's a good thing. But pretty manageable. Just stay inside and put on a sweater.
Coming up this week, we have some new Z77 motherboard reviews are going to hit the site. We still have a lot of people that are building Ivy Bridge systems and that kind of thing, so we're looking to do some of that. And we also have more power supplies. How about a 450-watt power supply for those of you building low-power quiet systems?
They still make those?
Apparently they do.
I'm like, wow, that's so twee. Is it like, are they fanless? Do they actually still need fans to do a 450-watt power supply?
Not fanless, but very quiet.
Oh, my goodness. We got some interesting stuff coming up next week. We're going to have a review of, or at least our initial impressions of Lenovo's Yoga, their new Ultrabook. We're going to be talking to Max Scoville, of all people, who is a trained artist, along with being the co-host of Destructoid, the TWiT show. And it's actually going to be talking about Samsung's Galaxy Note and how amazing it is to have a screen that actually supports enough sensitivity to be able to do drawing on it. And we've got some more exciting stuff coming up with digital photography, and hopefully before the end of this year, our Winatron build, which is kind of like a home gaming cabinet on steroids and growth hormones. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be coming up on TechZilla, and I am, for one, very excited. That's about it for this edition of Twitch. This week in computer hardware, Twitch, TWICH at twit.tv is the email address. And if you want to watch more of the show, and we really hope you do, you can head on over to twit.tv/Twitch. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.